You can have your
Main event of the evening.
motorcycle humps, ready to race to you.
These days are ours. These days are ours.
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today, now that we have completed our overview of every film directed by Garry Marshall,
You see, now I'm ready, and I've finished the course.
we're going to look back and give our top 5 Garry Marshall films.
Oh, this should be very exciting, Peter.
Number 5.
Number 5 is all the way back at the beginning. It's his very first film, Young Doctors in Love.
ABC Motion Pictures and 20th Century Fox present Young Doctors in Love. A comedy with stripers, strippers, virgins, surgeons,
If you plan to remove the appendix, you will have to break the skin.
Young Doctors in Love is a fast-paced parody of medical-themed soap operas. It has a really fun cast, basically all of whom get something to do. Michael McKean is terrific as an arrogant, hotshot young doctor who is humbled by love and circumstances. It's a blast.
My number 5 is also Young Doctors in Love, and it is really the only airplane-style free-for-all comedy in Garry Marshall's filmography. I don't know if he should have made more, but I'm glad he made this one. The cast in this movie is absolutely incredible. Besides Michael McKean and Sean Young, we have several people from Happy Days, Crystal Bernard, Ted McGinley, and Gary Friedkin, plus all-time legends like Patrick McNee, Harry Dean Stanton, Dabney Coleman, who is hilarious in this movie. Just a really fun, zany film that took me back to the days of the 1980s.
Number 4.
Number 4 is a pick where I am going to have to defend this one a lot on moral standards, because of course it is Overboard.
Seems a mystery woman was picked up by the Elk Cove garbage cow shortly after midnight.
Overboard is a very effective romantic comedy. It plays with class tensions a great deal, and Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn have absolutely fantastic chemistry, and it's just a lot of fun to see them interact, especially knowing that they are actually together off screen. But also, it is very hard to get past the central premise that it is about a woman with amnesia being taken advantage of by a guy who knows the truth, who is trying to exploit her for labor. And that's one of those things you just kind of have to go, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Woo! Yeah.
I also want to add that I think one of the best measurements of whether a romantic comedy is good or not is when it starts getting ripoffs. And I know of at least one ripoff of this movie. I don't remember the title, but it's one of those Lindsay Lohan Netflix holiday movies. She plays the Goldie Hawn role, and the Kurt Russell role is Cord Overstreet from Glee.
I have a place.
Does it have room service?
It's basically this movie, except with all of the objectionable stuff removed. She's not as cruel to the people who work for her at the beginning, and he doesn't know her real identity, so there's none of that. And what you're left with is a movie with no real tension or stakes. It's nice that they tried to address some of the stuff, but it's also like, well, now you just have what is barely a movie.
Overboard is very much a movie with tension and stakes. It was actually one of my honorable mentions. It did not make my top 5 for some reason.
Missed it by that much.
But again, I have to praise the cast of this movie. Katherine Hellman and Edward Herrmann play absolutely insane rich people who live a very eccentric lifestyle. But the real reason to see this movie is the romantic chemistry between Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn. My pick for number 4 is a comedy drama about two very damaged people trying to find love again, trying to trust again, even after some bad life experiences. It is Frankie and Johnny, starring Al Pacino and Michelle Pfeiffer.
Frankie?
Johnny?
Ooh, I just got goosebumps.
I was curious, Peter, was that film in contention for your top 5 at all?
It was, but ultimately it is an honorable mention, yeah. Frankie and Johnny, like you said in the episode where we talked about it, it's the kind of movie that people used to rent on video or DVD and watch as like a date night or the like and really enjoy it. Yeah, that's another one with a really great cast. Al Pacino and Michelle Pfeiffer both play their roles very well. Nathan Lane is there and he's a national treasure. Hector Elizondo is, of course, present and excellent as always.
This is a very mild, very low-stakes film, and actually kind of subtle for a Garry Marshall movie.
Number 3.
People like to hate on sequels, but sometimes sequels can take what is enjoyable about the original and build on that. And I think that The Princess Diaries 2 Royal Engagement successfully does that with what was good about The Princess Diaries.
Princess Mia has 30 days to learn how to be a queen.
She must marry before she can take the throne.
Shut up.
And more than that, it is a very good romantic comedy for grade schoolers. It's a very good introduction to what is enjoyable about them. There is just something very enjoyable about seeing two attractive, charismatic people who have that undefinable thing called chemistry and watching them interact with each other. And for that, I say thank you, Garry Marshall and Shonda Rhimes and everyone else.
Peter, my number 3 pick is also Princess Diaries 2 Royal Engagement. I was actually shocked that this movie ranked so high in my listings. I put all the Garry Marshall movies into Preference Revealer, and I was surprised at how often I was picking Princess Diaries 2 over a bunch of other movies that Garry made, just because the cast is great. The movie looks fantastic. It is set in the fictional kingdom of Genovia, which has its own Panera. And the costumes in the movie are great. All the actors seem to be having a wonderful time.
And they're having a lovely time.
They're having a lovely time!
I want to point out John Rhys Davies as Viscount Mabry, our villain.
It's not a very difficult job, you know. You just have to open the door before the passenger dies of old age.
Jonathan Rhys Davies is so much fun in that movie. I once again want to point out the time that he tries to humiliate Mia and reveal that she's wearing a fake leg to fake riding side saddle, which does not have any bearing on his overarching evil plan. He's just doing it to be extra evil.
He's just doing that to be the Dick Dastardly of the movie, and I love it. He enjoys being a villain so much that you can't really hate him for being a villain because he gets so much fun out of what he does. And there's a great scene where he squares off against Hector Elizondo. Hector Elizondo is the mainstay of the Garry Marshall movies. His role in The Princess Diaries and Princess Diaries 2 is one of the best roles that Garry ever gave him. And this is also the film that allowed Julie Andrews to sing for the first time in public since her surgery. This was a surprisingly enjoyable film for me. And I would say people can even skip Princess Diaries and go right to Princess Diaries 2 if they want. Do you need to see Princess Diaries before you appreciate Princess Diaries 2?
Not necessarily, but also I'm not going to say watch the sequel first, just for completion's sake.
Number 2.
Number 2 is probably the movie that Garry Marshall made that feels the most thematically relevant to our original beginning as a Happy Days podcast. It is a film set in mid-century America. It is a film chock full of nostalgic hits of the time. It is a film about coming of age and of reevaluating your relationship with your father. It is The Flamingo Kid.
I remember the day me and the guys first took Jeffrey to the Club Flamingo.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
My number 2 pick was also The Flamingo Kid, and in my notes, I said that exact same thing. It is the film that is closest in tone to Happy Days. This film was made at a time when Happy Days was coming to an end, and in its last few seasons, Happy Days largely bailed on the nostalgia angle. So if people were nostalgic for nostalgia, they could get it from The Flamingo Kid. But you also have a very touching story about a young man at a crossroads in his life, and there are 2 adults that he could be listening to, his father and a very flashy car dealer played by Richard Crenna, and he briefly falls under the spell of the car dealer before realizing that the car dealer is full of crap and that his father was right all along.
It's basically a love triangle, but with dads.
Number 1.
I once read someone say that the thing that every pop song aspires to is to be like a folk song. It aspires to be something so universal that it feels like it belongs to an entire place and people instead of just one person or one band.
Something that will grow so big that the whole world will reverberate with its sound.
A lot of movies aspire to be like fairy tales. They aspire to be something so archetypical. It transcends just being a movie, and it feels like a story that people tell one another just when they're together. And for that, I can think of very few movies that do that on the same level as Pretty Woman.
Touchstone Pictures presents the story of a date.
Wow.
This isn't a date, it's business.
That led to a deal.
I'd like you to spend a week with me, be at my beck and call.
It's gonna cost you.
That's becoming a dream come true.
My number 1 by far was also Pretty Woman. This was Garry's most successful film and most famous film, and deservedly so. This is the film that took Julia Roberts from being a quirky indie actress and turned her into a mainstream superstar. The chemistry between her and Richard Gere is still effervescent even today. And as you say, it is a fairy tale. This is a variation on Cinderella, but it's really Julia's performance that makes the film come to life. She has almost supernatural charisma in this movie. She is so winning and so likable in this movie. This movie was one that everybody in America saw. We actually bought it on VHS, and my sister and I would watch that movie all the time, and quotes from that movie just work their way into our conversations. We would just say, like, color me happy. There's a sofa in here for two.
Well, color me happy. There's a sofa in here for two.
Like you said, everyone in America saw it.
So I hadn't revisited the film in a long time since those days, but I was very encouraged that the film still works like gangbusters. It's still as charming and funny as ever. And I think in a lot of ways, it became the thing that Garry was chasing after for the rest of his film career.
I think so, yeah. I think that looking at Marshall's filmography, something he consistently does very well is romantic comedies. Overboard is probably the first example, and of course Pretty Woman, and Princess Diaries 2. I would say Runaway Bride has its flaws, but it has its moments where it works. I would say Frankie and Johnny counts, even if it's more on the dramatic side of the spectrum. And of course, the trilogy that he made at the end of his career. Pretty Woman is absolutely the biggest success out of all of those.
He was never able to top it, but it's a tribute to the movie that he kept trying. Really, if you're only going to watch one of Garry Marshall's theatrical movies, you probably have already seen Pretty Woman, but if you haven't seen it in a while, definitely return to it. While I watched Pretty Woman, The Flamingo Kid, and The Princess Diaries 2, I just had a big smile on my face for the whole movie. Those movies very much cheered me up. There are Garry Marshall films that I watched and felt just awful by the end of them, and maybe you had that experience too. There are a lot of feel-bad movies in Garry's filmography.
I did not use preference reader like you. I just made a list of the movies in chronological order and was like, okay, Young Doctors in Love. Do I like Beaches more or less than Young Doctors in Love? Less. Do I like Beaches more or less than Frankie and Johnny? Less. And that was basically how I made my list. I will say that New Year's Eve did not make my bottom three, so there's that.
I was surprised that Exit to Eden did not make my bottom three.
Two of LA's straightest cops.
I gotta get a bikini wax.
Just stop telling me about that disgusting female stuff.
Are going undercover to the last place on earth they should ever go.
When we first reviewed it, I thought that was a shoe-in for last place, and it didn't actually make my bottom three.
While we were watching Georgia Rule, I was wishing for a rollerblade race.
Oh, definitely. What I found in ranking Garry's movies from best to worst is that it was a lot like ranking the episodes in any given season of Happy Days. There were a few that bubbled right to the top. There was a few that sank right to the bottom. But I found that there was a lot of movies in the middle that I didn't really feel one way or another about. Did you have that experience as well?
Yeah. In hindsight, Nothing in Common just kind of faded from my memory. That's not one that really stuck with me. Raising Helen, I had a lot to say right after we watched it, but after a few months, it's like, eh.
Nothing in Common and Raising Helen were two of the films that settled right into the middle of my list, along with Runaway Bride, Beaches, Dear God. Those were films that I didn't really feel one way or another about. But once you get past that, I think there are a few films that caused me to have really negative reactions. Now, I'm not going to do a bottom five list, but did you have a film that came in dead last in your rankings?
I did. And it was Mother's Day.
Mother's Day for me came in third to last. The films that I ranked at the very bottom were the ones that were most unpleasant for me to sit through. And my dead last was The Other Sister.
Yeah.
And my second to last was Georgia Rule. Georgia Rule is not really badly acted. And it's not bad on a technical level either. It's just that watching that movie was a very unpleasant experience for me. With both The Other Sister and Georgia Rule, I kept having to stop them after 10 or 15 minutes and collect my thoughts and clear my head and walk around the block. And then I would come back and watch 10 more minutes.
Yeah, Georgia Rule is like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like shoving your head in a bucket of ice water.
It's a very confining movie. As a viewer, you're often spending a lot of time watching characters having the worst conversations of their life while in pretty small, cramped rooms. They're in motel rooms or in bedrooms, and there's no getting out. They're having very, very difficult, very, very unpleasant conversations, and they're just living in their misery.
Normally, with Garry Marshall movies, you can count on it making wherever it takes place look fantastic. Like, you watch Runaway Bride and you think, I want to visit that small town. I want to go to that hardware store.
I want to go to there.
Or, I would love to go to Genovia, the fictional country that is not real. But with Georgia Rule, I came away from it not wanting to visit that town, because now I forever associate it with just incredibly uncomfortable conversations about childhood sexual abuse.
I've been back and forth on this, whether I wish I had known what Georgia Rule was about before I went in, or if I'm glad I didn't know. But I can definitely say that that was the movie that surprised me the most. Boy, I thought it was going to be a completely different kind of film than what it turned out to be. Georgia Rule and The Other Sister were both passion projects for Garry Marshall. He very much wanted those movies to be made. He made Runaway Bride for Disney so they would let him make The Other Sister. That's how important that movie was to him. And he paid for Juliette Lewis's insurance for her to be in the movie. And so I feel a little guilty about hating that movie so much. But for me, that was just a very unpleasant film to sit through, mainly because of the acting.
Yeah.
Peter, that will lead me to one of the questions I wanted to ask you about Garry Marshall's filmography.
Questions, questions, questions. Modern minds can come up with 3 questions.
What do you see as Garry Marshall's main strengths and weaknesses as a director?
As already mentioned, one of Garry Marshall's biggest strengths as a director is making places just look really incredible and fun to watch. He has a knack for finding cool things in any given location and working those into his movies, like the Musée Mécanique in San Francisco, in The Princess Diaries, making the small town in Runaway Bride look absolutely idyllic and drenched in autumnal colors, finding incredibly fun stuff in New York for New Year's Eve. If he did not go into filmmaking, he had a fantastic future as a travels agent.
He does bring out the best in the cities that he films, even in the movies I didn't like The Other Sister. The Other Sister makes San Francisco look amazing. I will say that one of his great strengths was in creating a happy, comfortable atmosphere on his set that would bring out the best in the actors that he worked with.
So I knew Garry Marshall was really special, and I knew Julie Andrews was really special. But now sitting here watching this from this point of view, they're 2 of the most magical people I have ever met. This was the film that changed my life.
The actors often seem to be really enjoying themselves. They seem to be at ease. It often brings out something joyous in their performances. But I also think that Garry had a great eye for talent. A lot of people who went on to be famous had one of their first big roles in a Garry Marshall movie. And Garry was great at nurturing talent. He recognized very early that he had something special in his working relationship with Hector Elizondo, for instance, and he kept putting Hector Elizondo in movie after movie. And Hector would give great performances in film after film. Hector is so good that he's even good in Exit to Eden, which is a terrible film. Hector is one of the few people who manages to emerge from that film with his dignity intact, because he actually gives a credible performance, even if he's not what I pictured from the book for that character.
And he gets to keep his clothes on the entire time.
Garry would find supporting actors like Patrick Richwood or Jane Morris or the Vogt brothers and really see something special in them and say, I'm going to use you in movie after movie because I know you're going to do a good job. And they always do. It becomes a ritual when you watch Garry Marshall movies as they go on. Like, what is Larry Miller going to do in this one?
Sir, if I may say so, you're in the right store and the right city, for that matter.
What I see as his weakness is that this is something that plagued Happy Days as a television show occasionally. Garry will feel the responsibility to tell darker or more serious stories and delve into more controversial issues. And he's really not the kind of director or storyteller who's equipped to deal with those stories or issues. Most of Happy Days' very special episodes don't work very well, in my opinion. And some of them are among the worst Happy Days episodes ever, like Kiss Me Teach or Such a Nice Girl or No Thank You. Boy, that was a rough one to get through. Here in his filmography, we see that there is a film about child sexual abuse. We see a film about a wealthy family that distances themselves from a daughter with special needs. And in a lot of films, there are subplots about death When Garry was at his peak as a TV producer in the 1970s, one of the other big TV producers in the industry at that time was Norman Lear.
And Norman Lear basically defines what we think of as socially conscious programming for the whole family. Stuff that makes you think about the prejudices you hold while also being something you can watch with your parents or your kids.
And I think Garry always wanted to be like Norman Lear. I think he was trying to be like, oh, I can do that too. I would have told him, Garry, don't try to be Norman Lear. Let Norman Lear be Norman Lear. You just be the best Garry Marshall you can be. So I see sometimes darker or heavier themes that kind of spoil some of his movies, like Nothing in Common. All I wanted from Nothing in Common was an Odd Couple style comedy about Tom Hanks and Jackie Gleason. I didn't want to see Jackie Gleason's diabetic foot in close up or anything. I didn't want to see that. And then there's films like Beaches and Dear God that often have darker themes woven into them. And I just don't think Garry is equipped to deal with those darker stories. Would you have advised him to stay away from the darker, heavier stories and just make lighter, more fun films?
I think that was kind of the idea behind the Holiday trilogy, which occasionally also tried to evoke heavier subject matter, albeit in a very clumsy way. I do think that would have been good advice. Tonal consistency is important because if you're dealing with heavy subject matter but not giving it the way it deserves, it can be kind of disastrous. And likewise, if you're dealing with lighter subject matter, you can't make it seem more important by throwing in references to real horrifying things that happen to people.
I am now starting to appreciate Overboard more and more because that movie does not even have any remotely serious elements to it. It takes place in a surreal cartoon world right from the beginning. All the characters in it are sort of grotesque exaggerations of human beings. Speaking of the Holiday trilogy, I knew in advance that Jason Sudeikis was going to be in Mother's Day, but I didn't know what he played. I am a lifelong viewer of Saturday Night Live, so I am very familiar with Jason Sudeikis' work from that show.
All right, here we go. I'm about to serve up a heaping spoonful of Maine justice, you hear?
And I was thinking, oh boy, Jason Sudeikis is going to be in this. I wonder what kind of wacky, crazy, zany antics he's going to get up to in this movie. And the first time we see him in this movie, Peter,
he is visiting the grave of his deceased wife and mother of his children.
Yes, the very first time we see him, he literally peeks out from behind a grave.
And his entire arc is about learning to celebrate Mother's Day again. Mother's Day is not a holiday that requires a lot of celebration. You do something nice for the mom in your life. That's it.
That's it. That's it.
Right now, they don't have a mom in their lives. Maybe they have a grandmother they can send cards to.
Even the best of the Holiday trilogy, which is New Year's Eve, occasionally cuts to Robert De Niro dying in a very darkly lit hospital room.
Halle Berry's plot in New Year's Eve culminates in her having some kind of video call with her overseas military boyfriend.
And her military boyfriend is played by Common. I will say that I was haunted by the end of that scene because it's so strange.
It's not as depressing as Robert De Niro slowly dying, but it is pretty depressing. One of the big problems with the Holiday trilogy is that they have so much stuff in them and they feel the need to try and be everything to everyone. For the preteen Swifties in the audience, Taylor Swift and Taylor Lautner are here. You want to see Taylor Swift and Taylor Lautner? Do they add much to the movie? Not really, but they're there. For the oldsters in the audience, you want to see Robert De Niro? Yeah, he's slowly dying, but he's here. Saturday Night Live fans, Jason Sudeikis. Is he going to do anything funny? No.
I think the Holiday trilogy films were made for people who only go to the movies once or twice a year. So when you go to the movies once or twice a year, you have to get a little bit of everything.
If you see only one movie this year, why go at all? You're not going to enjoy it. There's too much pressure. You're sitting there, all right, this is it for 11 months. This better be a good one.
They're movies for people who don't go to the movies very often. What I wanted to ask, though, Peter, was do you see any recurring themes or motifs in Garry Marshall's movies?
Looking over his films, something I noticed about Overboard is that part of Kurt Russell's character development is that he kind of has to learn how to be an actual parent to his children and not just someone that they can pal around with, which did remind me of the episode of Happy Days where Howard is insecure about his relationship with Richie and he brings him to this big Leopard Lodge meeting for fathers and sons. And it turns out that the fathers who are trying to be pals to their sons are generally pathetic and kind of creepy. And it's better to be someone that your son can have a serious conversation with.
If I were writing a career retrospective about Garry Marshall's movies, I would call it Love for Sale, Sex, Money, and Social Class in the films of Garry Marshall. One thing I see as a recurring motif through his films is the theme of money and class and how these affect the relationships that we're in. Two scenarios that Garry likes to return to over and over again in his movies are characters who come from humble circumstances and suddenly find themselves in the world of wealth and privilege. And then the opposite, people from the world of wealth and privilege who suddenly find themselves taken down into the more humble world. We see this right away in the first film, Young Doctors in Love, where the poor little interns get to visit the mansion on the hill owned by Dabney Coleman. And what they don't know is that Dabney Coleman is on his way down the financial ladder, and he will soon lose all of that. That mansion on the hill is something for them to aspire to. And then in the second film, you have Matt Dillon coming from this working class Brooklyn neighborhood, and he gets to visit the fancy country club, and he gets hypnotized practically by this world he finds himself in. And then, of course, you have Pretty Woman, which is about a streetwalker in Los Angeles who then gets to enter the world of wealth. Even in the film Beaches, which is about a friendship rather than a romance, there is definitely a theme of social class in that film because Cece and Hillary definitely come from different social strata.
And that might be why Hillary is so judgmental of Cece's ambition, because she didn't necessarily have to be ambitious. Her family was rich. They could afford to send her to horse riding camp.
And did you notice how in Beaches, Hillary's life is very boxed in by social expectations. This is how a young, wealthy lady is supposed to act. And that same thing happens to Juliette Lewis in The Other Sister. Juliette Lewis is forced to play tennis because that is what a wealthy young lady is supposed to do, even though she hates tennis. And in Beaches, of course, Hillary is forced to ride horses or something.
You can definitely see that in The Princess Diaries as well. Mia is suddenly thrust into this world of royalty and how that impacts her relationship with her family and her friends. Probably less so Princess Diaries 2, since everyone in that movie is kind of royalty, but at the same time, it is about how when you are royalty, that really heavily controls what your relationships can be. To an extent, I think you can sort of see that in the Resolution Tour story in New Year's Eve 2. Zac Efron is a delivery man. He's not super well off. And Michelle Pfeiffer, she's not like super wealthy. She's a secretary at a records company, but she does seem to be, at the very least, better off than he is. And she is the one who has the thing that he wants initially, which are the tickets to the gala.
In Beaches, the class difference is very defined. Even when Cece makes money, she spends it in a tacky way because it's new money. And Beaches definitely makes a distinction between old money and new money. And one thing that I would say is a weakness of Garry's later films is that eventually he gives up on the social class theme and everyone just seems to be living an unrealistically cushy lifestyle, no matter what their job or station in life is. The characters in the Holiday trilogy all seem to have great houses and apartments, no matter what they do for a living.
That might also be an aspect of Georgia Rule, too, because Lindsay Lohan's stepfather is very well off. He bribed her with a car so that he could keep abusing her. That is also kind of there in Georgia Rule.
That makes Georgia Rule kind of the evil twin of Pretty Woman, where in Pretty Woman, the girl meeting the rich guy is a good thing for her. And then in Georgia Rule, the rich guy is the worst thing that could possibly happen to the heroine of the film.
Yes.
But that leads me to my big question, Peter. Was Garry Marshall a good film director? In other words, did he do more good than harm as a filmmaker?
I think that's kind of a difficult question to ask for any filmmaker, because there are filmmakers who have made lots of films that I personally do not like, but at least one movie that I love and will defend with my life. And in those cases, I would say that yes, they did more good than harm because they made me happy in some way. And I would put Garry Marshall in that category. Yes, looking at his films, he has made many films that have made me yearn for it to be over already. But he's also made films that have filled me with joy, that have given me things to think about. Even the ones that are not very good do kind of build to an interesting thesis on class and wealth and whatnot. And again, as mentioned, he was by all accounts wonderful to work with, and that is surprisingly rare in Hollywood. So yeah, I'm going to say more good than harm.
I will also say more good than harm, although it was a close call. Garry's films brought me some enjoyment and some laughter, but they also cause me a lot of anguish and discomfort. It's difficult to forgive The Other Sister, Georgia Rule, Mother's Day, and Exit to Eden, especially if you watch all four of those back to back, which I definitely don't recommend. Would you recommend that people watch all of Garry Marshall's movies?
It has given me a whole new appreciation for his career and for his life and for movies as a whole. I think that when we think of directors, we tend to focus more on those that we associate more as big storytellers who have a very consistent aesthetic and very consistent things that they return to over and over again. And I think that's true for every director, even the ones we don't necessarily think of in those terms. And it's fun to pick a random filmmaker who is not necessarily on the level of a Scorsese or a Tarantino or a Hitchcock and visit their work through those lenses. So even if you don't do that for Garry Marshall, obviously I do think you should, but pick another one.
I would very much agree. I think there are certain auteurist directors, you mentioned a few, people like Scorsese and Tarantino and Hitchcock, who get analyzed to death. People look for themes in their career and they study them back to front and analyze them to death. And there are a lot of directors whose films don't really get that kind of critical attention. And I think their films can be just as interesting to study as some of the more acclaimed directors. It is worthwhile to study the films of Garry Marshall. But if you really only have time for a few, I would say just watch Pretty Woman, Flamingo Kid, maybe Princess Diaries 2. And heck, make time for Young Doctors in Love and Overboard.
Frankie and Johnny. Give that a shot too.
Frankie and Johnny, it deserves your time. It is a sweet little film. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on thesedaysarhours.libsyn.com.
And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysarhourspodcast@gmail.com. Now, normally, Peter, this is where I ask, what do we have on the docket next time we get together? But we are embarking on a new phase of the podcast. We are going to explore the greater world of Happy Days adjacent media. The people in front of the camera and behind the camera on Happy Days worked on all kinds of other projects, movies and television and more. And who better to discuss all of that than us? If you don't mind, I would like to make the first pick in our series.
Absolutely. I have absolute faith in you.
I would like to start our discussion with a look at the 1971 educational film, The Money Tree, starring Anson Williams.
Why does it have to end like this? Where did it fall apart?
This was made right around the same time that he made the Happy Days pilot, and there is no one in the world I would rather talk about this movie with than you.
I am incredibly flattered, and I'm sure that we will learn a lot about how to manage money. If there's anything MST3K has taught me, it's that short educational films are the best way to learn anything.
They certainly are, and boy, does this movie have a lot to teach us. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Gary these days been lying in his bed, mate, working on the same car going on a decade. Scribbles on junk mail don't draw attention. I never really noticed, but now that I mention it, there ain't a lot of boys named Gary these days, born with a cigarette glued to the face. Fix about anything a hammer can handle, saving all the money cause a Gary don't gamble. Ain't a lot of girls going by Debbie anymore, but they got the same nicotine pouring out the pores. Time leaves town but the minute hand stays. There ain't a lot of boys named Gary these days.
It's not a very difficult job, you know. You just have to open the door before the passenger dies of old age.